You are watching Cold Fusion.
Hello, and welcome to another Cold Fusion video. Diablo here. Today's smartphone industry is starting to solidify, moving from the early infancy stages to somewhat of a toddler. Nowadays, each manufacturer has to up its own efforts and continue to innovate just to stay relevant. Samsung has unveiled their new flagship phone for the Galaxy S line. In this video, we'll take a quick look at the S6 and its performance in comparison to the competition, and I'll be voicing some opinions throughout the video. Generally speaking, it will seem that the theme behind the new Galaxy S6 and 6 Edge is a mixture of redesign and refinement. Alright, so let's get straight into it, and let's begin by looking at the specs compared to the Galaxy S5. So the S6 is 7 grams lighter and 1.3mm slimmer than the S5, at just 6.8mm. The screen is 5.1 inches diagonally, with a pixel density of 577 pixels per inch. This is compared to 432 pixels per inch on last year's model. The S6 has a whopping 3.6 million pixels crammed in on that screen. That's the most of any device today. There's also now 3 gigs of RAM on board versus 2 of last year's model. Alright, so let's peer a little bit deeper. Let's look at the guts of this thing and see how it compares to the other flagships of mobile computing today. Under the hood, the S6 has a new processor, the Exynos 7420, and many of you might be asking, where's the Snapdragon variant? Well, as it turns out, Samsung has actually divorced from Qualcomm this time round as a secondary supplier. This new processor actually breaks new ground, as it's one of the first 14nm die process chips to exist. Basically, this means that it's more efficient and uses less power. How much more efficient? Well, compared to last year's model, which used a 20nm die process, it's 30 to 35% more energy efficient. And in addition to this, it has 20% better performance. So why the new die process? Well, some of you might know about Moore's Law. It was a law proposed in 1970 by Gordon Moore, and it states that processor speeds, or the overall processing power of a computer, will double every 2 years. And one of the only ways to achieve this is by cramming more transistors into a given die space. So the smaller the die process, the more transistors you can fit in there. So that's why this tiny 14nm process is giving such great advantages. And these advantages have translated into initial performance tests. The S6 and S6 Edge have exceptional multi-core number crunching performance, crushing its main competitors. That being said, the Tegra X1 wasn't included in these benchmark tests. This raw CPU power is good for tasks such as web browsing, extracting files, and loading long lists of items, and things along those lines. The story is a little different for single core performance, and it seems like the iPhones just outperform the S6 in this case. In terms of graphics, for raw performance without a screen, it's the HTC M9 first, Galaxy S6 second, and then the iPhone just trailing behind. When you start running tests and force the GPU to push 3.6 million pixels, the performance takes a hit, and you can see it here. The HTC M9 just screams ahead, with the iPhone 6 not far behind, and then the iPhone 6 Plus, and then a considerable distance behind is the Galaxy S6. But these results aren't actually as bad as it sounds. All current mobile games should be able to run flawlessly, but just keep in mind in 2 years' time this may not be the case. There's just simply too many pixels up there. And before I continue, it might as well just be said that benchmarks have to be taken with a grain of salt, but this just gives you somewhat of an idea of general performance. Okay, so moving back onto the specs, unfortunately the battery of the S6 is 250 mAh smaller than the S5. And with all those extra pixels to push, some of you may be worried, but with processor efficiency up by 30% or so, it should all balance out. In fact, it turns out that the S6's battery performance is just a hair under the iPhone 6 Plus, except for music playback. Alright, so let's move on to the camera. The camera is definitely a story of refinement. 16 megapixels on the rear, 5 megapixels on the front, both with an f-stop of 1.9, which means more exposure, 60% brighter on the front and 34% brighter on the rear to be exact. The camera also loads up in the background whenever the phone is awake, so it launches faster. There's also faster autofocus and autofocus tracking. Optical image stabilization makes a return, and it was absolutely brilliant in the Note 4, so potential S6 buyers will be happy about that one. But unfortunately, when it comes to the UI, it seems that Samsung has shamelessly stolen some ideas from HTC. Okay, so let's move on to the design. As they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and many beholders out there find this phone beautiful, but I'm not actually wholeheartedly one of them, unfortunately. For me, the front and the sides of the device look great, although the top and bottom bezels could be a bit smaller for a more attractive proportion. And I think the design language in regards to the trims of the phones does seem to have a slightly bulbous nature. And when you flip the phone around, the unsymmetrical fingerprint scanner, in combination with that camera mount design, just doesn't sit right with me. But that's just my opinion. The Gorilla Glass 4 back panel is refreshing, but may be of some concern to those who aren't a fan of phone cases. Because, you know, we've all seen the smashbacks of the Nexus 4 or iPhone 5 and 5Ss. Okay, so there's been a fair few changes to the design, but this has come at a cost. There are two main trade-offs to this new design, and it may annoy some people out there. Number 1, waterproofing and water resistance has now gone from the phone, and number 2, there's no removable battery or SD card storage anymore. For some smartphone enthusiasts, these issues could make or break your purchase. But for the general public, mainly those coming from an iPhone or phones with sealed-in batteries, would probably not mind too much. One other gripe that I have with the design of the device is the bottom. Although it looks good, I'm somewhat disappointed by Samsung's lack of creativity here. Because really, there's a wide plethora of design combinations that you could use for the bottom of any phone. But this clearly is borrowing from the iPhone 6's design language. Some people out there may not care, but I'm just not too keen on it. I think Samsung should be more like HTC in this regard, finding their own unique design groove, making it so good that other people want to copy from you, and not the other way around. But to Samsung's credit, the S6 Edge is pretty unique. I'm glad they've fixed some of the design issues with the Edge edition, namely that the Edge runs along both sides of the device, and I could just imagine how natural it will feel to swipe in from the side of an app whose UI demands that kind of motion. The face down notifications are pretty cool as well, so you get a subtle indication of when someone is trying to contact you. Samsung has also built certain software around this like tickers, alarm clocks, and something called People Edge, where you can pull up your favorite color-coded contacts with a swipe from the edge of the screen. And I might also add that the price point this time is correct. Having this the same price as the regular S6 actually makes sense this time. Now this means that it's a variation of the S6 and not somewhat of a different premium range. The price point was an issue that had me rather reserved about the Note 4 Edge. So in conclusion, despite some design quirks, my initial thoughts on the S6 and S6 Edge are mostly positive. And if you're out there and you don't mind giving up a bit of graphics performance for a very high screen resolution and are a fan of the design, I definitely think the S6 and S6 Edge would be worth a look. It's probably a worthy upgrade for someone who has an S4, but for S5 owners or Note 4 owners, I think these guys will still get a lot of extra mileage out of their phones. As for me, I am personally happy with my Note 4 and don't really see a reason to change to an S6. But who knows, when the phone comes to stores in Australia, I'll go in, have a quick play and see what I think about it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully this video has been quite informational for you and you've found some extra things that were useful to you. And if you have, don't forget to share it along to someone who'll be interested. Give it a thumbs up, write a comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you again soon for the next video. Cheers.
Cold Fusion. It's new thinking.